The Campbell Group has teamed up with PI Perspectives to offer listeners top-notch, affordable insurance solutions. Private investigators can get insurance for their business for as low as $305 per year. Apply now at piperspectivesinsurance.com and receive a quote back within 24 hours. Satellite Investigations has launched its new website full of great new content. Matt and his team have released some great informative blogs. Make sure you log in to LinkedIn and follow Satellite Investigations for the latest content. Over the past year, our industry has been the target of foreign governments and agencies that have attempted to recruit unsuspecting investigators to gather intelligence or immediate expatriates. PI Perspectives is teaming up with the Federal Bureau of Investigations to get the word out about this ongoing crisis. If you've been contacted by an individual or company that might seem suspicious, please contact the FBI at tips.fbi.gov. You can also contact the New York field office at 212-384-1000 to report suspicious activity in any state. The link is also in the show notes. Even if you completed a job and it still doesn't sit right with you, you can report this activity. The only way to stop this trend is to work together. So let's do it. Do you enjoy our podcast and the guests we bring you? Since 2019, Matt and his team have done their very best to give you amazing shows each week. If you feel like our show has helped you to be a better investigator, or maybe even inspired you to become an investigator, please let us know. We're looking for testimonials. Drop Matt an email with a recorded 20 to 30 seconds of you talking about this podcast. You can also email him something verbal about the website. His email is matthews@satellitepi.com. And if you really feel blessed for having this content, consider supporting Matt and our show by joining Investigators Toolbox. You really have to see version 2.0. And at just 49 cents a day, it's a no-brainer. Now let's jump into this week's episode. Welcome to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. Today, we have Brad Dalhover. Brad has worked as a private investigator and case management creator. He's now offering consultant services through Centennial Consulting to other investigators that are struggling at being efficient with running their company. This is a great episode for new business owners or owners who have hit the wall in growth. Please welcome Brad Dalhover and your host, private investigator Matt Spaier.
And welcome to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. We are back for 2024 and looking to have some new live shows, and very excited to have an old friend back on the show, somebody who worked for one of our sponsors for a very long time, Brad Dalhover. I want to welcome you back to the program. How are you?
Hey, good to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So new year and new things going on. So why don't you tell me what you've been up to? I know you had left Crosstracks a while ago, and you had something you were doing in between, but now you're off to a new venture. So tell me what you've been up to.
Yeah. So, my obligations were, fulfilled at Crosstracks and TIG, and, those great guys over there, great team. But I had another opportunity with an old college friend, actually, and working with military, law enforcement, first responders, providing gear and equipment, to them. It was an operational role where, you were trying to essentially, a lot of it was procurement, but some of it was, dealing direct with those folks, trying to figure out, hey, pushing different manufacturers, different types of lines of gear, things like that. Unfortunately, that ended due to a health issue with the owner of the company, and started trying to figure out, what my next move was. It was a strange position for me to be in, because I haven't had to look for a job, or haven't not had a job in 20 years.
Right.
So it was kind of a strange place for me to be in. So I took, did what a lot of, business advisors tell you to do, is like, take a bunch of assessments. What do you want to do? What are your strengths? What are you good at? So I ultimately fell back on what I kind of fell in love with when I was working in the case management space, which was teaching and helping investigative professionals bridge the gap between their investigative knowledge and their business knowledge. As you know, there's quite a gap between the investigator and the businessman,
Right.
and a lot of times they just need help. I was no different. I was a one-man show with a blue Ford Ranger and a laptop and a camera.
Right.
And I had no business knowledge. All I knew is that my buddy worked at Hartford and he was going to start giving me cases.
Right.
So at some point, uh, it was a good fit. And I just started to kind of explore it and reached out to a couple folks, and it kind of spread a little quicker than I thought. Just like anything else, you get to a point where you're like, well, wait, this is a thing. Like, this is really it for me. And initially, it was just something I was going to do to pass the time until
Right.
I found my next challenge and my next gig.
Right.
And it's something that I think is necessary for the industry, and I think it's something that'll be helpful. So I started
Right.
looking into helping investigators in a consulting role, whether it's something from startup or existing businesses.
Mhm.
I wish that when I was starting Centennial Investigations, that something like this was available to me. I was kind of on my own. I was reading whatever books were out there and going to conferences, but like you and I have talked about, there's a minimal amount of business advice and panels and information out there at various conferences.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, you go to conferences, and conferences are definitely necessary in this business, but
Absolutely.
it's always about the latest technology, trends and things like that. But sometimes that aspect of it, how to actually run your business, how to manage your business, it's not really covered in there. So there definitely is a need to it. So you have this Centennial Consulting. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about here today in what you're doing. But before we get into all that, tell people a little bit about your background. Obviously you were with TIG, but prior to that, like, what type of investigative experience do you have?
Sure. So right out of college, only because I was a procrastinator. When I went to Florida State, and when you got to your senior year, you could either take 5 classes or you could do an internship. Well, I waited and waited and waited. And when I walked into the internship enrollment office on the last day before the deadline, of course, they're like, the only thing open is a investigative company local here in Tallahassee. I said, well, sounds like I don't want to take 5 classes.
Right.
So let's go do this. Just like a lot of things, the stars aligned. Two of the most it's hard to explain, almost like two females, Angela and Kathy, ran AKA Investigations and really took me under their wing. I still talk to them to this day, and just that's kind of how it started. And then so finally, after a couple of months at doing the internship, they hired me, and that was great. Finally, after about, I'd probably say 9 months or so, they were like, you're too, we can't afford to pay you what you are worth. You need to go and start searching out other opportunities. Very motherly like advice, right? Like,
Right.
I'm sure they wanted me to stay, but it was like, look, you need to kind of get away from the nest.
Right.
So after that, I joined, found a position as a field investigator with Omega Insurance Services. I don't know how many people actually remember Omega. It was one of those companies that became, I think, First Advantage, and then I think moved into Global Options, and I'm not really sure where it went from there. My territory was the Mississippi River East. It was a lot of travel, but you were young and just burn up the interstates. Uh, Following that, I kind of progressed through that organization as a field training investigator, and they used to call it quality control. So I was the guy out there at 6 o'clock in the morning, making sure the new guys were actually on site and awake and had all their equipment. We do vehicle checks and things like that.
Sure.
Lot different than the way things go today.
Yeah.
And then I worked for a regional company based in Atlanta that kind of just covered the Southeast, whereas Omega was nationwide. And after that, it was one of those things where it's time to to go out on your own. You kind of saw where there was more money in the ownership of a company versus, what you were making as a field investigator. And I was always a W-2 employee as a field investigator. I was, I knew there were subcontractors out there. So then I started Centennial Investigation in 2002 and followed that model of your employees were full-time. They were W-2s. They were you trained them, you paid them. There was no outside 1099. There was no this, oh, well, you can work for somebody else. They were full-time with us.
Right.
And, that model and, like some of the points that, I'm sure we'll go over, that evolves over time. So I operated Centennial until 2018, grew year over year. We were doing really well. Some of the things that, I'll get into today, some of the challenges that we faced are a lot of the things that I kind of help folks with today. There's growth issues. There's just things that you encounter that you don't realize are coming down the road and that they ultimately get you. And then 2015, 2012, really, while Centennial was in good hands. I'd hired some good people. I had some good sales folks. Centennial was doing really well. Ops managers were performing their duties. Field investigators were doing well. Kind of started a passion project, which was case management. I'd always been kind of a technology geek, if you will. And that was one of the things that I couldn't find anything that really met my needs that wasn't overly complicated, I should say. At least that's how I felt at the time.
Right.
That's changed quite a bit. So we launched PI Direct Link in 2015, and then that was acquired in 2018 by Crosstracks, and that's kind of where the 30,000-foot view of how I got to Centennial Consulting today.
Yeah, nice. That's definitely a good background there, because obviously we want to lay the foundation that you know what you're talking about. So kind of,
yeah,
maybe,
it's
right?
they're like, where did you go to school? It's like the investigative school of hard knocks.
Hard knocks, exactly, right?
That's where it came from.
Can't really do the job if you haven't done the job, right?
Oh, that's a fact. And when I was with Omega, at the time, I mean, it was grueling. I mean, they paid, I think I was making $32,000 a year. And literally I was gone 14, 15 days at a time in the field.
Wow.
You were all over the place. So that's kind of where there was a couple months ago, somebody's like, hey, do you want to do field investigations and surveillance? I said, windshield time is, I've put my time in, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the same way. I just kind of weaseled my way out of doing field work. And I do miss it a little bit. Yeah, I miss the stories. I miss the fun. When someone asks me like, oh, tell me about an interesting case you worked on, I'm like, oh God, I got to remember. Like I got to think back. There's so many more things have happened. Okay,
Right.
so we're going to actually take a quick break. And when we come back in, I want to really start delving into some of these challenges that you had talked about, and maybe give some direction to some folks and folks that maybe are new to the space, or maybe that they've hit a wall after 5-10 years and they're not seeing that growth, or just feel burnt out. Let's talk a little bit about that. So everybody sit tight, and we'll be right back.
After 4 years of development, Scope Now is proud to announce the release of Grid. Grid combines OSINT with real-time physical data to achieve new levels of intelligence gathering. Grid supports over 50 data types and hundreds of thousands of sources. Upgrade your OSINT capabilities with Grid and elevate your intelligence team today at scopenow.com. Check out the PI Institute of Education at piinstitute.com. Since 1989, Kelly Riddle has been teaching on subjects such as surveillance, nursing home investigations, insurance fraud, domestic investigations, hidden assets, and accident scene investigations. The PI Institute of Education is a featured learning partner in the investigatorstoolbox.com. So check out the free content on the site, then visit the Institute for more great savings on additional classes. Specializing in the research of liability for personal injury claims, Pacific Liability Research offers insurance assessments of all applicable liability coverages to help determine what a case is potentially worth. Have a case with no insurance policy? Since 2019, the highly trained staff on their insurance discovery team has located over 100 million plus in previously unknown insurance coverage. They offer a full refund for any inaccurate results, and they do not charge for no-hit searches. Additionally, Investigators Toolbox members automatically receive 50% off their first case. Just mention Investigators Toolbox when you fill out your first order. More information can be found at pacificliability.com. Contact them today and discover the immediate impact that Pacific Liability Research can provide.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. Today we're here with Brad Dalhover. Brad has a consulting company called Centennial Consulting, and he's a seasoned investigative professional who's done field work. He's done case management creation. He's done a little bit of everything. And he's here to help you with your business, whether you're just starting your business or you've hit a wall after being in business for a certain amount of time. I know I'm about 19 years in now, I think, and you do go through those periods where the growth is not where it was at one point, or maybe you're feeling a little burnt out. So that is a long-winded, wordy welcome back to the program. So Brad, I'm going to say welcome back, and
thank you.
Let's dive in. Let's talk about some of the challenges, man. You had talked about growth issues. So what are some of the things that you've seen over the years?
Yeah. So again, all of the stuff that I talk about and all of the stuff that I kind of, help people with and coach people with is all things that I feel like I've gone through at some point. And then as like you're talking about, you're 19 years in, you look back and you're like, you identify these different kind of caves or rabbit holes that you went down. You're like, I could have avoided that, or could have avoided that. One of the things that when you and I connected, one of the things that I thought about was, I know that you, last time we talked, you were wrapping up building your house, and, I was involved in, building mine down here. Right. And I feel like the sales side and the growth side is kind of like building, a house. You have to start with, you're clearing the lot. It's the foundation. And, at first, when it gets completed, you move in, everything's awesome. And about, I don't know, for me, it was about 3 months in, you kind of wish that you would have changed a couple of things. Oh, I wish I would have put that outlet over here, or right. I wish that door opened in instead of out. Right. When you start a business, I feel like you sell, things are going along, you're seeing what happens, and everything's great. And then you're spending all your time on investigations, and then you don't focus as much time on your sales and your marketing.
Right.
So along the same lines of building that house, now a year or two goes by in your business, the year or two goes by in the house. Now what are you doing? Oh, I want to change the backsplash in the kitchen. I don't really like those floors that we put in the den. Business is no different. You're getting steady revenue. And then all of a sudden now the revenue is either stagnant or it starts to slip a little bit. And like renovating a house, you've got to renovate your business a little bit. You've got to change your tactics. A lot has changed and a lot's happened since you first started that company. Your tastes change, your ideas change, your clients change, your mindset changed.
Trends.
When I first started Centennial, we did a lot of personal or domestic investigations. And once you realize that that's not really your thing, it's not what you enjoy, it's paying the bills. And then you pivot and you start getting, oh, I've got this client and I really like those investigations, and they're more recurring. They pay more, or whatever the case may be. They're not as messy, however you feel about it.
Right.
So that's kind of where on the sales and marketing side of it, we just kind of get folks to step back, and we help them take a look at what they're doing. I was the same way. We've been doing it this way. It works. Everything's all good. But then when somebody else comes in and takes a look at it, it's great. You've done a great job here. Let's tweak this. And have you ever thought about changing this? And it's one of those things where you end up just finding small improvements and eventually it really improves over time. It's that very, I don't know if you've ever just reread Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Mhm.
And it's very similar to that is how I feel now. I wish that book would have been out 15 years ago, where
Right.
it's you get 1% better every day,
Yeah.
or at least that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I do every year, usually around November, December, is I'll do like a year in review, kind of like what worked, what didn't work, and then I'll set goals for the following year, and just being honest about it too. Like, okay, this is where we were deficient, this is where we could do better, this is what I'd like to achieve. And I feel like just that exercise of doing that gives me clarity and vision. And I think because this industry is so widespread on what you can do, there's so many different investigative things you can do that sometimes you get bogged down all because you're all over the place. I'm doing a little bit of this, I'm doing a little bit of that, I'm doing a little bit of that. Obviously you in the beginning you do whatever you can because you want to keep the lights on, right?
Mhm.
But as you find, like you had mentioned earlier, the type of investigations you like to do, and pivoting yourself to that vertical, and then attacking that vertical and saying, okay, I want to be the business to hire for this particular space in this market,
Mhm.
right? And then focusing in on that. I think it's a much more successful way of doing things is being known as the company that handles this particular type of thing than trying to do things that you don't necessarily do. However, again, throw back to conferences and things that are necessary, networking and finding people that do the things that you don't do, and then being able to service through those other people. That is part of the pot of stew that you put together, right? You're putting all the ingredients in for a successful business. That's part of it as well. And just being able to identify and understand, be very good at what you do, and then know people that are very good at things you don't do, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because one of the things that I had in preparing for this, one of the things that I had kind of written down was you don't have to scramble. You don't have to scramble all the time because at least related to your business, your investigations are going to be chaos at
Mhm.
some point, some of them more so than others. But if you can minimize the chaos that infiltrates the business side, the administrative side, then you're not as overwhelmed. You don't have a fire here on an investigation and another fire over here, and now they're colliding and you're in the middle of it. And
Yeah.
that's where I try to get them to just put the right systems in place to kind of prevent that from happening. And that's one of the things that we go through as far as, okay, look, here's what's going on, and here's how you can pivot a little bit and just calm that fire down and prevent
Yeah.
that from happening in the future.
Yeah, and as you continue to grow your business, you reach a certain point, you have to understand that there will be a time where you have to decide who you are and what you're doing, right? And by that I mean, are you an investigator or do you own an investigation company? Because they're two very different things,
Very.
right? And when you do reach that point in growth, like you got to understand that you cannot do everything yourself, right? You have to start finding good people to surround yourself with that you can count on, that can do your billing, that can do collections, that can do quality control and your case management, that can do sales. So like these are all different things that yeah, there are not enough hours in the day to do everything, and
No.
something's going to suffer if you try and do everything yourself, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think that gets into, one of the concepts that I just worked on with a client here recently was spending in order to make more. And
Mhm.
when you first bring that up, they're like, wait, I don't have anything to spend. And it says, well, I'm looking here at your business, and you're spending about 2 hours a day just fielding phone calls, whether it's from clients, whether it's from your staff. And while that's okay if you're small, this particular business, this was a very well respected investigator, good investigator that bills out at about $125 an hour. Now, that 2 hours every day that he was spending fielding phone calls and things like that, that's $250 a day that he's not billing out. Now, You look at that and you're like, oh, it's $250 a day. It's 2 hours. Well, you multiply that over the course of the week and then over the course of the year, that's $65,000 a year.
Mhm.
So you can hire a good assistant at $45,000 a year, and now you have 20 left over. If you think about it, Matt Griswold has a really good quote that I've recently kind of resonated with me. It's like, think in decades and not in days.
Mhm.
Where, yeah, an hour here is no big deal, right? You and I are going to spend an hour here, shooting the breeze on investigations. Not a whole lot of time. Now, if we had to do this every day and then every week and then every, throughout the year, we'd spend a lot of time together and we'd spend a lot of money.
I'm not that interesting, Brad. You don't want to talk to me though.
I don't think I am either. Small doses is what my wife tells me.
Right.
So that's to get the investigator or the owner, the business owner, to think long term about how these things are affecting the business over time. I think that's really important, and one of the things that I typically like to open with and discuss goals. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, tell me about the business 5 years ago and where you are now.
Yeah. No, you should always be looking at that stuff and always understanding the dynamics of it, and really, again, deciding who you want to be, and putting those procedures in place with good people, and it really taking the time to do it. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, as you're building your brand, you're going to build trust in your clients, and they're going to have an expectation of a certain quality of work product. And if you can't deliver on it, unfortunately, this is the "what have you done for me lately" business, that we're in. You're only as great as your last case, right?
Yeah,
If you start getting distracted by business management, the quality of your work will take a hit, right? And having faith in the people that work for you, that they're going to deliver that same kind of quality. I mean, it's possible if you find the right people, the people that are invested as you are, right? Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? Hiring somebody like that, right? Paying them a good wage. Obviously you want somebody to feel comfortable. You want them to feel like they belong to something, right? So maybe some sort of incentives on sales goals. If they reach a certain amount of billing, they're getting extra compensation. Like, those are tools to hold on to good people. Healthcare plan, retirement packages, things like that, right?
Yeah, it's completely important. And again, one of the four kind of pillars, I guess, that I've built this company on, and one of them is employees. And my focus on the employee side, as you kind of touched on, is productivity and retention.
Yeah.
How productive are your employees? How much, is that employee that you're paying whatever? How much are they billing out? A lot of investigators, and again, I'm guilty of this completely, is, okay, I bill at $100 an hour. I'm paying my investigator $50. So therefore my investigator is $50 an hour productive. Not necessarily the case.
Nope.
There's a lot that comes out of that. And again, like you're talking about with investigations, we all know that there's a difference between how field investigators operate and how your office staff operates.
Yeah.
Different billing rates, different abilities to bill out. If you got a surveillance guy, he's going to bill out one case a day, typically, that 8-hour day, or he's going to do maybe 2-4 hours. 8 hours is what he's going to get. If you've got an in-house employee and you have a good one and they're knocking out 6, 7, 8 social media investigations a day, they could bill out potentially more than your field guys. So depends on the business. And I think you have to look at the information and learn how to gather data for your employee performance.
Yeah.
And I give you a perfect example. In one of the management positions that I had over the years, I was kind of tasked with figuring out employee productivity. How are the employees doing? We didn't really have any type of measurement or any standard in place. So in this case, these were in-house investigative employees, and they were tasked with, to do a kind of medical canvassing, if you will. And you'd had an employee that was doing, say 12 a day. and then you've got another employee that's doing 8 and another that's doing 6. So wait, why is employee A doing half or doing twice as much as employee C? What you learned after looking into it was employee A, who on paper is a top performer, was actually fudging some of their work. Whereas the 6 to 7 that the 2 other employees were doing, that was a good baseline. That's what, the work called for.
Right.
So when you have systems in place to kind of identify that, and you take the time to look at that sort of thing, you can catch those types of things, whether it's, is it a training issue? In this case, it was an employee just not doing their work kind of issue. So it's important to look at, the productivity and retention when you start getting to the point where you need employees.
No, 100%. That whole quality control is such a big issue. And there is a time in the growth phase where you got to let that go and give that to somebody else as well. Otherwise, you never take that growth level. I think like another issue or problem that I think a lot of investigators have is their rates and their fear of raising their rates, that they're going to lose business. And you can go years and years and years keeping the same rate or not billing yourself accordingly out of fear. And that'll keep you from realizing that next level. Or maybe you're eating tolls or eating mileage or things like that, for fear that oh, client's never going to pay for this, or it's not authorized or anything like that. It's almost like you can't apologize for your rates and what you do, right? This is a service industry. You provide a service, you need to be compensated accordingly for that. And you always see these questions when people start, what should I be charging? What's the rate? And some people hold it to their vest. They don't like sharing it. Other people will tell you what their rates are. You shouldn't be afraid to share what your subcontractor rate is, and you shouldn't be working for peanuts either. Just kind of understanding that. And it's funny. I've come across that in New York, and out of state investigation companies looking to hire my company to do work in New York. And I'm not the most expensive guy. I'm not the cheapest guy. Probably somewhere closer to the expensive, but not the most expensive. Where somebody would call me and say, I need something done, but the rate is going to be like, let's say $50 an hour, and in New York, $50 an hour is not cutting it, right? For anybody. And they just don't understand that the cost of doing business in a certain city is more. So you got to do research. You got to understand what you should be charging in the area of where you're at. Do you see that a lot with the consulting people kind of undercharging?
Yeah, I see it again, runs the gamut. You have, I've worked with clients that haven't raised their rates in 5 years. I've worked with clients that, like you said, are scared to raise their rates. And then I've worked with clients that have raised their rates almost like you do your business review, right? At the end of the year, they look at all their rates and they just say, hey, we're raising all of our rates 5% or 6%, whatever the number is that they've become comfortable with that's worked year over year. At Centennial Investigations, we used to raise our flat rate surveillance $25 a year without hesitation. Never had a single client ask or pull out because of the rate change. Yeah. It's like, well, look at everything else. I mean, right now, if you were to raise your rates $25 a day, what are we looking at? $3 an hour. So it's not a big a deal. Now, are you going to why'd you raise your rates? Then you need to be prepared, obviously, to explain why. Yeah. But with simple, look, how much do eggs cost?
Exactly.
Bacon. So there's your answer. That's why I'm raising.
Do you like bacon? That's the question. Who doesn't like bacon, right? They should, right? And that's just the nature of business, right? Tolls are always going to go up, gas goes up, insurances go up. The price of case management systems, the prices of database usage, things like these are all things that need to get figured in to that rate. You should be charging a database fee, right? If you're recovering the money that you're laying out for these monthly subscriptions, like you should be building that into your price in some way, either putting it as part of your flat rate or, line item, having a line item for that. There are different ways of doing that, but you should be doing that. It should be part of the equation of doing things, right?
Yeah, I think that going back to, like you said, talking about regions, if you're in Atlanta or you're in LA or you're in New York, those are three very different price structures.
Yeah.
And just very simply looking at, let's just use insurance for an example. If you're in LA or you're in New York, your insurance rates are probably going to be higher. If you're in a large city, your insurance rates are going to be higher. And that's not only liability insurance, that is your auto insurance. That's your, if your employees are using their own vehicles, then you have non-hired auto insurance. And all that costs money. So, like you said, it's important to break down your expenses to understand what you should be charging. Just because the guy down the street who has, let's say he's a one-man show, not anything wrong with that, but his expenses are different than yours. His revenue share is different than yours. He's charging $75 an hour that he's putting in his pocket. If you're charging $75 an hour, you have more expenses, insurance. You may have, home office, internet, phone, vehicle, insurance, licensing, you name it. Yep. Your overhead is more than somebody else's. So I think you have to really take a hard look at that kind of stuff. Yep. And, data analysis, I think, is something you see a lot these days, that everybody is really trying hard to wrap their head around, just because they've never had to do it before. And frankly, the programs and technology to do that stuff now has become readily available, and it's easier than it has been in order for you to kind of analyze your business.
Analytics are super important.
Yes.
Yeah, really, really, really important. You got to be able to look at stuff like that. I remember there was, when I was much, much younger, there was a 3 or 4 year period where I stepped out from doing investigative work. I'd kind of moved myself into HR a bit. I liked recruiting. I liked interviewing people. I liked finding jobs. It was just something that was right before Y2K. So there was a good market for that, right? Yeah. But I was in the temp industry, right? Temp agencies and things like that. And one of the things I learned is margins, right? What do you pay somebody as opposed to what you bill somebody, right? So that should always be a factor in it, right? You take what that person is billing, how much they've actually billed a company, and you divide that by what you're paying that particular person, right? And that number should always be like around a 3, like dynamite.
Right.
The business is profitable, like everything's good. Getting down into the 2s, all right, it's getting a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Doing a less than 2, this person's not really making you money. They're not really costing you money. If it's a 1, bro, you're losing money. Like that person should not be working for you,
Yes.
Because you have to figure in all the other factors for it. Now, you could have some employees working for you that maybe are in that 1 to 1.5 number, but then you got another employee that's maybe working at like 4 or 3.5, and it kind of balances out. So, one of the other things too, a misnomer, I think, a mistake people make, and I'm guilty of it because I did it for many, many years. I'm never going to hire an office manager or secretary because they don't actually bill anything. Why would I pay something to somebody who's not actually going to bring money into the company? And it was like the stupidest thing I could ever think of, because like that particular person, you talk about taking those hours off your plate, the billing $125 an hour, yes, 2 hours a day, like that scenario, right? So if those employees, what you're paying them is allowing you as the sales generator, the one who's actually going to get the work to come in, if they allow you to be more productive, to produce more for the company, then they've earned their money without them actually billing anything, 100%. Right? So, just understanding that dynamic of it too. That was a big lesson for me. I went many, many years without having these extra people, right? And then there's the people who say like, okay, I've got X amount of people out in the field. How many support staff should I have to back those extra people up, right? That's another, like when you hit that growth period, that's another question that you need answered. Okay, so I've got, 5 people out in the field. How many people in the back end should I have, right? Sure. It's an important question to ask. I think your market sets yourself, how much you're bringing in. Will answer that question to you. But, to me, at least two people. If you're running five, it should be at least two, maybe three.
Right.
If people, I think that's a good number for it. But that's just my own opinion. You got to do
Yeah.
your own analysis on it.
Yeah, no, it took me a long time to figure that out as well. And then when it really came to fruition was when I found myself like on vacation, or I'm with my kid at the zoo and my phone won't stop ringing. And that's when, you get that side eye from your wife, or your
Yeah.
kid like kind of looks at you, it's like, why are you on the phone so much, Dad?
Yeah.
And then you once you pull that trigger and you realize, you're like, oh my goodness, I should have done this a while ago, because
Yeah.
now I'm not doing all of the things. I'm not sitting in the office till 8 o'clock at night. Or
Well, yeah, and they have this great tool that you can use called a virtual receptionist. One of the best things you can do.
yes,
Somebody who just answers your phone calls. They get in touch with you. They got so and so on the line. Do you want to talk to them? No.
Right.
Take a message or call them back. It's amazing. It's amazing. It makes you look more professional. You
Right.
got somebody. Welcome to Centennial Investigations. How can I help you? Instead of, hey, this is Brad. I'm at the zoo. What do you want? You bothering me? It looks better, right? And what I love about these things that they have now, like they'll email you a message, they'll text you a message, so you even like have record of called. They deal with those nonsense telemarketer calls that you don't get them anymore, because they're dealing with that for you, right? And it's not super expensive, and it's not really overhead for you, because you're not paying FICA, you're not paying somebody's health insurance. It's just a service that you're using a couple $100 a month, and you're writing it off, because it's part of a dues and subscription, right? Or however you want to line out of it, right? Things like that take you to the next level, right? So a guy like Brad comes in and takes a look at your systems and how you're doing everything. Okay, here's a recommendation of how you can be a little more efficient with running your business, right?
Yes. And I think that's where, one of the things, obviously, because of my background with case management, having, created one and, working for them over the years, technology is huge. And I still feel like in the industry, and you may be able to back me up on this, but technology is still, I feel like, underutilized in the investigative profession. Even going to like the virtual assistant. A lot of people still want to take that call. They want that call to ring into their cell phone. And while that's fine in some scenarios, when you get to a certain point, or you find yourself just, that revenue's flat, I think you have to take a look at your technology options. How can I be more efficient? Is there some automation that I can take advantage of, so that I'm not constantly doing these repetitive tasks over and over and over?
Yeah.
And this repetitive task is, again, taking 15 minutes of my time every day. So I'm spending an hour plus on it over the course of the week. And then, we've gone through how that snowballs on you.
Right. Just kind of understanding that. And understanding that if you have these extra charges that you're building in, like, it really goes a long distance. You were talking about 65K of extra time that you're doing. Like, there are tons of those little pockets of how you can be more efficient and generate more income. This is a great thing you're doing, man. It's great service, and it's not just for the newbie, right? It's for the people that have been in for a while, and just take a look how you're doing these things. You should always have some sort of review process. You should always have some sort of mentor, somebody to help you kind of you do what you're doing. I know for me personally, I probably have like 3 or 4 friends that are in the industry that are a little bit further along than me, or a little bit bigger than my business. I was just talking with somebody recently about this. Like, my company in New York showed like a 50% growth last year.
That's awesome.
Like, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it's scary, because can I replicate that, right?
Yes.
Was this just did we get a couple of big contracts in, or is this the new norm here? Do I have enough manpower for this? It's like these are big crossroads here. What am I doing here? Am I going to continue to grow, or am I going to level off, or all that? If you have the right procedures in place, you will continue to grow, right? it's called scalability, right? What is the scalability of your business? And we're going to end on that, right? So that, understanding that you should be modeling your business for scalability, right? Let's face it,
Correct.
we're all in business to be in business. We love investigations, but we love money too. We love the houses that we've built. We love, paying for the colleges for our children, these types of things. In order to reach that level, you need to build it in a scalable way, right? So, putting these procedures in place, using a company like Centennial to make sure that you're doing it. I mean, these are all good things. So, Brad, if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about it, how would they get in touch with you?
Sure. So you can put the information in the show notes, I imagine, but it's centennialconsulting.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different ways, like you said, it's for a lot of different people. I can cater anything from, I got a call once where it was like, hey, it's a case, an actual case. They didn't give me any details or anything, but just, I'm stuck. Is there anything that you can think of maybe that I haven't thought of? And we talked through a few scenarios and things like that.
Sure.
But like you said, it's the processes and it's how to get from A to B. Everybody wants to, here in the new year, everybody has goals, right? I want to do this or I want to do that. Okay, that's great. But how are we going to get there? It's like, going back to, I was talking about Atomic Habits. One of the things that stuck with me in that book was the winners and losers have the same goals. It's the processes and the things that they have set up that allow them to achieve those goals. And that's what I hope to bring, with this venture and kind of help the investigative industry and the investigators, the owners. It doesn't matter if you're having trouble with an employee or you're having trouble with whoever or whatever situation that may arise. I mean, I try to help as best I can.
Sure. Yeah. And I would encourage people to check out the website. I'm sure you're on LinkedIn. Follow you on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you follow me on LinkedIn. I know I'm going to be part of a panel at the end of the month that is going to be talking about some issues like this. So if you check me out on LinkedIn, you'll see the information on there. So Brad, it was great catching up with you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to everybody. And thank you everyone for tuning in and checking out this episode. We'll have a new episode next week. And take care, everyone. Have a good week.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, Brad, for sharing your experience. We encourage folks to follow up with him. His website link is in the show notes. We also want to thank Campbell Insurance Group for sponsoring our podcast. Remember to tell them you listened so you can save $50 when you apply for insurance. Additional thanks to Scope Now, Pacific Liability Research, and the PI Institute for Education for sponsoring the show. Also, don't forget about investigatorstoolbox.com, where you can type in version 2.0 25% to save $50 when you sign up. And please follow Matt and Satellite Investigations on LinkedIn. If you have a question or a comment about the show, you can email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com, and you can find him on Instagram and Facebook too. If you'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible, we'll be back next week with a new show. Make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.